a code red for humanity. Curb emissions and dramatically reduce consumption or face a world that is fundamentally different.
When Kermit the Frog sang, "It's not easy being green," I want you to know that he was wrong. He was wrong.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, 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 blah.
It is unequivocal that human activities are responsible for climate change.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero carbon.
East off.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista, Series 3, The Sky's the Limit. I'm Ian Collins and welcome to the penultimate episode of 2021. Can you believe it's been another year of wading through the hot air and nonsense coming from world governments in order to try and find out what's really going on the green agenda? The man with more determination to see this through than almost any other fully built human being is Dale Vince. Morning, Dale.
Yeah, morning, Ian. How's things?
It's good, and it has been. I mean, we've been doing this longer than a year, of course, but just in this section, 12 months are probably the most important since we've been recording this. Yeah,
it feels like that, doesn't it? And then I often think that each subsequent year does feel a little bit like that we get more traction, more focus and more promise, That's how it looks to me.
Let's start with this story, which is unfortunate. Campaigners losing court action over lawfulness of UK climate policies. This is the environmental campaign group that challenged how lawful the UK government's policies were, but losing a high court battle. What do you make of this?
It was interesting because they tried to claim they were seeking permission for a judicial review, claiming that government weren't doing enough, government policies were insufficient to hit the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees, which we've signed up to. It's legally binding on us, and that was a breach of human rights law. And the court threw that out. I'm not quite sure why. But these guys have said they're undeterred. They're going to appeal, take it all the way to the European Court of Human Rights if they have to. Though that probably takes too many years, but they're going to give it a go. And I think it's really interesting that the court taking this decision that it's okay for us to sign up to 1.5 degrees and then have policies that don't hit that or won't hit that, and that's not something that we can challenge through the courts.
Which is incredible. I mean, when you put it like that, that sounds incredible, unless it's one of those kind of weird technicalities of law that an appeal will iron out.
Yeah, maybe it will. It can happen, can't it? Maybe a higher court will say, no, don't be silly.
Yeah.
Because they do that sometimes.
Don't be an arse. That's what you want to hear judges say.
Because this has been happening in Europe, hasn't it? There have been successful legal campaigns in Holland and France, I think, against government policies that were deemed insufficient by the plaintiff, I should say, not the defendants. And they've won. They've had success.
Well, if a government sets a target and then the policies that surround that target can't possibly meet the target, then one would assume that's ripe for a challenge.
You would think so, wouldn't you? That would be the natural order of things in my world.
We'll keep our eye on that, so we'll get more detail on that, I'm sure, throughout the course of next year. Here's a question. Let's move to some football. Gareth on Twitter, can Forest Green squad cope with all of these games being rescheduled? This better not screw things up, says Gareth. An FGR fan, I'm guessing.
Yeah, sounds like it. And, we all hope the same thing, actually. It is a little bit of a, what would you call it, bit of an interruption in our schedule. But, I mean, it's only a week or so. It should be fine. We'll have missed 3 games hopefully by the time we come back. And, we've got a strong squad, strong mentality, great coaching staff. I don't see any reason why we won't come back and just carry on as we were.
I mean, in terms of scheduling, what are the ramifications of that? If a fan says, well, I was meant to go to a match today and it's off, but behind the scenes, I'd imagine that's pretty tricky scenario for all sorts of reasons, staffing and goodness knows what else.
Yeah, it creates some work at the club, really, in terms of, refunds or rebooking for a different date, same game, different date, that kind of stuff. But we've got the added uncertainty also of when we do come back, it might be without fans, which would, be a different thing again. We've been there before, obviously. I think we may go there again. It's a job to know. It's happening already in Wales from Boxing Day. Football games are without fans.
Yeah.
And, it tends to be that we follow what happens in Wales and Scotland. England does. We're just a bit more reluctant to do the things that we're doing.
Let's look at this story. This is a rather grim story. I know you're not a big Christmas fan, Dale, and it's not your time of year. But
did you hear that somewhere?
Yes, yeah, I think it's been mentioned. But this was rather grim. Santa's Lapland reindeer are starving to death and facing extinction because of climate change.
Yeah, an incredible story. And the winters are just too warm for them. So instead of snow covering the food that they like to eat, which they can scrape away with their hooves and their noses, it's ice and they can't get through. And then to compound that, the summers are too hot for them. They just physically can't cope with the temperature. I think it's 4 times hotter than it normally is, or something like that. I mean, this is quite severe, actually. And yeah, it's got a topical twist with it being about reindeer and Christmas, but it's absolutely a climate crisis story happening right now.
Indeed. Another one that we'll, I'm sure, revisit throughout the course of the new year and the like. Here's a question from Catherine, who says, Dale, your first Sky Diamonds sold out in minutes. When will you have more? Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. Last Thursday, we opened the online shop, finally, about a year after we launched the concept last November. And we sold out in a handful of hours.
Wow.
And the next, which we were pretty chuffed with, because we had no idea kind of really how the market would be, you know, if people would buy these things. I mean, I assumed they would, because I think they're amazing, and people do buy diamonds anyway, so why not? But until you've done it, you just don't know. And so to have had that experience is really encouraging for us. We're currently in a place where we're just trying to get into regular production coming out of R&D, and our next batch of stones will drop in late January on the shop.
That's good.
And we're launching a jewelry joint venture as well, around about mid-January, with a designer jeweler, which is something new.
Fantastic.
So we're just about to get gearing up. And
I mean, can I go to H. Samuels and buy one of your diamonds? That's the question.
Not yet. That's the dream. That's the dream, to be the Intel inside of the diamond world. You know, the little sticker on computers that tells you the chip that's in there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we want jewelers to see it that way, to say, look, all of this is made of Sky Diamonds, because, you know, the benefit to the environment from this kind of thing is so big in terms of avoided pollution and emissions and digging and all kinds of stuff.
But how does that? I know we've been over this territory before, but for those who don't understand this, is the value of the value of a diamond? You know, the diamonds are a girl's best friend. Every cliche about diamonds, etc. Is that based on the fact that, I mean, just parking for 1 second, the just industrial scale environmental impact and damage of mining original diamonds? But isn't it because of that they cost what they do, and therefore their exclusivity is reflected because they don't grow on trees? Whereas if you're growing them in a lab, as it were, does that somehow remove the mystery and the rarity nature of the diamond?
Actually, what's happened is that De Beers made diamonds very popular maybe 50 years ago with a very clever, powerful marketing campaign. And I mean, diamonds before that weren't particularly worth anything, and they're not particularly worth anything. There's no shortage of diamonds under the ground, for example. The supply of those is controlled quite tightly. But what De Beers have done is actually kept invisible from people the real impact of diamond mining. So they're not more valuable because they're so destructive to acquire, because that's hidden from view. So, for example, we published an independent study of diamond mining by Imperial College in London, and they found that for a 1 carat stone, which is 1/5 of a gram in weight, the industry digs 1,100 tons of rock and leaves 30 tons of toxic metals in the environment, uses 5,000 liters of water, and produces 0.5 ton of greenhouse gas. That's for one tiny stone. Now, De Beers don't share that. De Beers will tell you that diamonds are forever. What they won't tell you is that the impact of diamond mining is forever. On the question of value, it's one of those markets that's essentially man-made. You know, people want diamonds, and so therefore people will pay for diamonds. They become valuable. But try selling one secondhand, and you'll really struggle. So yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So the Dale Vince diamond is as good as a De Beers diamond.
It's actually better. I mean, it's more perfect, and it's certainly better in terms of environment impact. And we're price matching, so it costs less on the environment, and it costs the same for you to buy.
Got it. Let's move to this story. Climate change news coverage has reached an all-time high, almost changing language as well in the United States. This is positive, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen it over here as well, haven't we? With the Guardian changed the rules of engagement actually, and they don't talk about climate change now; they talk about the climate crisis or some version of words like that. Which makes it a little bit more clear that it's actually something quite serious, not something benign like global warming. It sounds a bit benign, doesn't it? You'll have heard people say, "Well, what's wrong with a bit of global warming?" For quite a lot actually. But this is happening in the United States as well, which is great news. And I think we've seen it over here as well with our campaign with the Daily Express this year was incredible. Their environment journalist John Ingham actually won Environment Journalist of the Year just recently, a couple of weeks ago. And when we bench tested in the summer, we found that the Express were running nearly as many environment stories as the Guardian were. And this is a right-wing newspaper, but they're running environment stories all of the time now, which I think is fantastic because people. This is how people see the world through the media.
Yeah, of course.
And if the media is running a constant string of stories they need to be aware of, then you know there's a problem in the world, and then the pressure comes for the government to do something about it. And governments are the same; they read the media, and if they think the media are obsessed by this, that, or the other, then they'll do something about it.
It's interesting because I took a call from a guy the other day who was not really sold on the a lot of the salient points of the environmental arguments and the nuances and the whole green agenda, really. But he did cite, and we've talked about Christopher Hitchens before, no longer, of this planet, as it were. But, I mean, he made the point, and this guy made the point. He said, look, you don't get two chances at this. So even though I'm skeptical, we might as well run with this just in case. And I thought, well, that's cool. That's all right, isn't it? Because at least he's willing to buy in to that possibility, which means the upshot is that he will alter his behavior and things he does as almost an insurance policy.
Yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. I mean, it's something known as the precautionary principle, actually. Yeah. But he's expressed it really rather well. And I'm reminded of my favorite cartoon of recent years is a little newspaper type cartoon. And there's a guy giving a presentation at the UN. And on the screen, there's a list of all these great things like clean air and water and no climate change, whatever it is, this whole list of benefits that we get by fighting the climate change. Yeah. And somebody in the audience says, but what if climate change is a hoax? And it makes the fantastic point that we have all these enormous benefits by acting now to prevent and avoid the climate crisis. Yeah. And the only downside is clean air, all these kind of great benefits of a green economy, sustainable jobs, all that kind of stuff. And where's the downside?
Here's a story. Sea snot, one of the grossest effects of climate change. Tell us more.
Yeah, sea snot is happening around Turkey right now. And it turns out that combination of pollution and climate have caused a bloom in phytoplankton, which is really interesting stuff. In Greek, it means plant drifter or vagrant, you might think. And that kind of resonates for me. I'm a plant-eating kind of ex-vagrant. But this stuff has kind of bloomed and then died and formed a kind of the basis for a new form of life to grow. So it's been collecting debris in the sea, rubbish, human rubbish, fish bodies, for example. And then bacteria has come along and started to feed off all of this stuff. And it's kind of like its own little ecosystem. It's clogging up fishermen's nets, which I don't think is a bad thing, actually, because that means they get to leave the fish alone for a while. But it's clogging up ports and stuff. And it's an interesting kind of impact from the climate crisis that's not about weather per se. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's not something burning, but it's the sea being clogged up with snot, which is not very nice.
Yeah,
but it's really real.
Yes, it's grim, but it's a reality. Ben on Facebook, final question. I know you're not a betting man, but do you think energy price cap will go above £2,000 in April? How the hell are we going to cope?
I think there's a good chance. And I was just talking to Radio 4 about that before doing this. And, this week the government bunged £1 billion into the hospitality sector to compensate pubs and places for less custom due to restrictions and stuff like that, to support them so they don't go bust. In the energy world, the government are doing the opposite. They're forcing energy companies to sell power and gas at 1/3 the price they buy it for, forcing losses on them. They've forced 26 out of the market already, made them bankrupt. Yeah. What the government needs to do is say that, energy prices are too high in the real world. At the moment, it's an unreal world in England, or in Britain rather, because we've got the price cap. In April, the price cap adjusts itself. Then we get the real world. And as Ben says, we could have north of £2,000 a year energy bills. Government needs to intervene in that and say, look, we'll take the hit. As a nation, we'll take the hit. We won't force energy companies to take the hit. We don't like the size of energy bills that are actually real.
Got it.
And intervene, do something, chuck a couple of £1 billion at it and level out energy bills for the next 12 months. Take all the anxiety away. There is a cost of living crisis going on at the same time with inflation and all kinds of stuff in it. You know what I mean? But what the government have done in the energy market is just perverse. They're forcing energy companies bankrupt. They're pretending to keep the price of energy down. In April, the price of energy will adjust itself to this crazy winter wholesale market. And it's going to go through the roof. And it's not a good thing.
No, not a good thing at all. That's it for this episode, Dale. We'll speak next week for our final one of the year. I think we're looking back next week, aren't we, at the year of 2021.
Yeah, I think we are. So that's a kind of classic, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be failing if we didn't do that, wouldn't we, Rose? It's absolute classic.
But we got away without mentioning Christmas, particularly, didn't we?
Yeah, that's true.
This one,
true,
2 days out from the main event.
Well,
I felt I should explain what I don't like about Christmas, but maybe we can do it on the next one. Looking back
indeed.
At Christmas,
when it's all over with. When it's all over with.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay, don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast on your podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically. Leave a review there as well. And do follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince and facebook.com/DaleVince.
Zero carbon.
East of.